It was a little past noon when I pulled into our place, an old, two-story farmhouse sitting out in the heart of Kansas, surrounded by acres of wheat and alfalfa fields. And just so you know, no, I'm not a farmer. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell you the front from the back of a tractor. Luckily, the land belongs to someone else. My name's Dexter Adrian. Maybe you've heard of me or read some of my articles. I'm an art critic, and my weekly columns are published in around 200 newspapers nationwide. They're also featured on several big websites. Most of my work is done right here, in this quiet, rural house my wife and I decided to settle in about 8 years ago. Sure, I do travel a bit, 1 to 3 days a week, depending on which art piece I'm reviewing. My wife, Samantha, is a surgeon at the county hospital in what the locals like to call a town. Don't get me wrong, the people around here are good folks. They're hardworking, honest, and dependable. The kind of people who look you in the eye when they shake your hand. But the town itself? Well, it's not quite what I'm used to, especially after living most of my life in Southern California. I met Samantha at an art show in Los Angeles. I was there covering the event for a paper, and she was taking a break from her medical studies. She was still a student back then, finishing up her medical degree. That day is still as clear as ever in my mind. I was jotting down notes while studying a piece of art when she came up to me. "That's an interesting piece," she said. "Oh yeah," I replied. "What do you think about it?" To be honest, I told her, I've seen 6-year-olds come up with more thoughtful work with a box of crayons. "Not a fan of abstract art?" she asked. "I don't mind abstract art, but this? This isn't abstract. It's just lazy. Probably the work of some artist who hasn't had a sale in months and figured they could slap some paint on a canvas, throw in a speech about inner turmoil, and call it a masterpiece. Someone will buy it, but I wouldn't spend a dime on it myself." "Are you an art buyer?" she asked. "No, I'm a critic," I replied. "Dexter Adrian," I introduced myself, holding out my hand. "Samantha Lawman," she said, shaking my hand. "A real art critic?" she asked with a hint of surprise. I chuckled. "Yeah, they actually pay me to say harsh things about pieces like this. Some artists even wear it like a badge of honor when I tear apart their work." She laughed. "Sounds like an interesting life." I shrugged. "It has its moments. I travel to see exhibitions, meet a few artists, but most of my time is spent sitting behind a desk. Honestly, it can get boring." "What about you?" I asked. "I'm a medical student. I'll start my residency next year." "Now that sounds exciting," I said. "It's all work, no play," she admitted. "That's why I'm here. I needed a break from studying." "I get that," I said. "If you want to see some real art, take a look at that piece over there." I pointed to a painting of a snow-covered farmhouse. "Tell me what you think." She walked over to it, her face lighting up. "That kind of reminds me of where I grew up in Kansas," she said. "I love how the light reflects off the house," she added. "Are you sure it's moonlight?" "Stand right in front of it and take another look," I said. She moved closer, and I followed her. She stared at it, surprised. "It looks so different from here," she said. "Exactly," I nodded. "The way the artist blended the colors and used those brush strokes, it's like you see a whole new picture depending on your angle. Look closely, and you'll notice details that weren't visible before." "You're right," she said, smiling. "I like this one." "Congratulations, you're officially an art critic," I teased. She laughed. "Oh no, I could never do what you do. I'd be way too scared of hurting someone's feelings." We spent the next few hours wandering through the rest of the exhibit. I had to admit, I enjoyed hearing her perspective on the different pieces. When she had to leave, I hated to see her go, but I understood. She had to get back to her studies. Before she left, we swapped numbers and emails. "It's been great meeting you, Dexter," she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "I'd love to do this again sometime," she added. "So would I told her. Over the next few months, we got to know each other better and became exclusive. At first, I worried that the 6-year age gap might be an issue for her, but it wasn't. If anything, she made me feel younger. One thing led to another, and before long, we were married. I thought I had hit the jackpot. Samantha was, and still is, a warm, loving woman. She never complained about my travel schedule or the fact that I had to fly across the country to cover art exhibitions. Meanwhile, her hours were all over the place during her 5-year residency. Some days, she worked normal shifts, and other times she had late nights or on-call hours, depending on what the hospital needed. We had talked about it from the start, and I didn't mind her unpredictable schedule, even though it sometimes made weekends or evenings together tough. After her residency ended, she got an offer from the hospital in her hometown. They had just built a fancy new surgical center, so locals wouldn't have to drive hundreds of miles for operations. By then, my work was syndicated, so it didn't matter where I lived. As long as I had internet access, I could write from anywhere. So, we packed up, sold the condo, and moved to Kansas. The house we bought was a beautiful two-story farmhouse, supposedly built in the 19th century but renovated with all the modern comforts, including central air. I made sure it had cable and high-speed internet, both essential for my work. We turned one of the upstairs bedrooms into my office, and the third bedroom was reserved for a nursery. The master bedroom was huge, with an ensuite bathroom big enough for both of us. But the biggest change for me? The nights out here were actually dark, pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was a huge contrast to the bright lights I had been used to in the city. What I did love, though, was the night sky. I had never seen so many stars in my life. I used to have a little telescope when I was a kid, but nothing compared to this. Seeing how much I enjoyed stargazing, Samantha surprised me one night with an 8-inch telescope, complete with all the accessories to take photos. Needless to say, I thanked her multiple times that night. It took me a while to get the hang of astrophotography. It wasn't just about pointing the camera at the sky and clicking a button. There was a lot more involved, adjusting settings, tracking the stars, but eventually, I got it right. Before long, my office walls were covered in pictures of planets, galaxies, and nebulae in brilliant colors. Samantha even picked out a few to hang in her office. What I loved most, though, were the nights when Samantha and I would sit out back with the telescope, stargazing together. In time, we came to share many personal moments beneath the stars, with only the night sky watching over us. In those moments, I felt on top of the world. For the first 7 years of our marriage, everything seemed perfect, at least to me. I had a job I loved, a beautiful home, and a wife who I thought adored me. I used to think, what more could a man want? We had even started talking about having kids. Samantha had been on birth control, wanting to wait until she was more established in her career. I respected that and didn't push her. But then, I started noticing little changes in her. Her work hours got longer and more unpredictable, and she started snapping over the smallest things. We began arguing over the most trivial stuff. I chalked it up to the stress of her job and tried not to make a big deal out of it. One year, she got invited to a medical conference in Wichita. It was a 5-day event, starting on a Monday. Before she left, Samantha seemed nervous and off, but wouldn't tell me what was bothering her. I tried to be affectionate the night before she left, but she brushed me off, complaining of a headache. The next morning, she was gone, promising to call every night. I had an exhibit to review in New York that week, and as I looked at my schedule, I realized I could meet her in Wichita on Friday and surprise her. Maybe we can spend the weekend together before heading home. The exhibit in New York went smoothly, and I got my article in on time. Samantha did call every night, just like she promised, but the conversations felt strained, like she was just going through the motions. I could tell she wasn't really interested in talking. Still, I didn't mention my plans for Friday. I thought showing up unannounced would be a nice surprise. But when I arrived at her hotel in Wichita, I couldn't find her. After confirming my identity, the front desk told me she hadn't checked out yet and was probably still in one of the conference sessions. I gave her a call. "Dexter," she answered, her voice quiet. "What's going on?" I asked. "I wanted to surprise you. I'm in town. Thought we could spend the weekend together and head home Sunday." "Where are you?" "Still in a seminar," she replied, sounding annoyed. I heard someone talking to her in the background, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Then she muffled the phone, clearly trying to hide something. When she came back, her tone softened. "That's really sweet of you, but I won't be much fun right now. I've been invited to observe a couple of surgeries here, and I'll be tied up for at least another day. I didn't know about it until a few hours ago. I'm sorry, but I'll be home late Sunday. We can catch up then." I felt disappointed. "I've missed you all week," I said. "I miss you too," she replied. "Please, just go home. I'll see you Sunday night, I promise." "Okay," I sighed. "Love you," I said. "Love you too," she answered. But before hanging up, I swear I heard her whisper something about dodging a bullet. Maybe I misheard, but it left me feeling uneasy. I caught a flight back home that afternoon, feeling far from happy. For the first time since we got married, I found myself wondering if Samantha was cheating on me. Samantha didn't get home until early Monday morning, around 3:30 a.m. She tried to be quiet, but I was already awake. She stashed her suitcase in the closet and went to the bathroom. A few minutes later, she climbed into bed, wearing a long robe. When she snuggled up next to me, I caught a whiff of cigar smoke and aftershave, along with something else I couldn't quite place. It made my skin crawl. Go take a shower, I mumbled, pulling away. You reek of cigars, I added. I'm too tired for that, she grumbled. Fine, I said, getting out of bed. I'll sleep on the couch. I grabbed my pillow and a blanket, heading downstairs. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning. When I got up around 8, Samantha was in the kitchen, groggy and making coffee. I thought you'd be home last night, I said, keeping my distance. Sorry, she muttered, rubbing her eyes. The smell of cigars and aftershave still lingered on her, and it was all I could do to stay calm. What took you so long? I asked. Everything went later than planned, she explained. And I had a nightmare trying to catch a flight. What's with the attitude? You seemed pissed when I came in. You know I'm sensitive to smells, I said. You stank of cigar smoke and aftershave when you got in. What were you doing? I asked. Oh, Dr. Oswald took a smoke break on the way to the airport, she said. I guess I didn't realize you'd pick up on it. And the aftershave? I pressed. That must have been his too, she said. You must have been pretty close to get it all over you like that. He gave me a hug when he dropped me off. That's all, she added. Must have been some hug, I said dryly. Look, nothing happened, okay? She snapped. You're awfully defensive for someone who says nothing happened. I shot back. She sighed, rubbing her temples. You're right, I'm sorry. I was exhausted and just didn't think about showering when I got home. I should've. What's your schedule like today? I asked, changing the subject. I don't have to be at the hospital until 11, she said. I'm meeting the new head of surgery and have a couple of procedures lined up this afternoon. I'll be late, I said, letting it go. Got it. I'll order a pizza for dinner, then. As I turned to head upstairs, Samantha stopped me. Dexter, I really am sorry we didn't get to spend time together this weekend. I gave her a small, forced smile. Me too. Maybe next weekend. That week flew by. Between my exhibit in Denver and Samantha's unpredictable schedule, we barely spent any time together. We did manage to have a couple of moments over the weekend, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was weighing on her mind. About a month later, she mentioned that we were invited to a hospital event to introduce the new regional director. I got my suit cleaned, and we went. Samantha looked stunning in her black dress. It wasn't too revealing, but it definitely caught people's attention. I was proud to have her by my side. That's when I met Dr. George Oswald. He walked up to us, looking like he had just stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine. He had a full head of dark hair with just a touch of gray at the temples, and his suit fit him perfectly, clinging to his muscular frame. He was at least 3 inches taller than me, and probably weighed 20 pounds more, all muscle. And then, I smelled it, the same aftershave and faint cigar smoke that had clung to Samantha the night she came back from Wichita. This must be the famous Dexter Adrian, he said, extending his hand. I've heard a lot about you. We shook hands, and he flashed a grin. In fact, I have you to thank for helping me dodge a bullet, he added. Really? I asked, trying to keep my composure. How's that? Well, a couple of years ago, you wrote a review of an exhibit in Washington, D.C. My wife and I were thinking about picking up a few pieces from that show. But after reading your article, we decided against it. Glad I could help, I said, forcing a smile. I take it you spent some time with my wife during that conference in Wichita? I kept my tone casual. Yeah, you've got yourself quite a woman there, George replied, glancing at Samantha in a way that made my blood boil. It made me wonder if there was more to their relationship than I knew. Yeah, I agree, I said, trying to keep my cool. She's a great surgeon. He smiled, looking her over with an expression I didn't like one bit. I've got big plans for her, and I'm sure she's more than capable. I noticed Samantha's face flush slightly. What could make her blush like that? I couldn't figure it out, but it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. The evening went on smoothly enough after that. Dinner was filled with speeches from hospital bigwigs, praising Dr. Oswald and going on about everything he had done for the community. It was the usual fluff, and I could barely stay engaged. Finally, they let us enjoy the open bar and dance floor. Samantha and I danced a few times, but she also danced with Dr. Oswald a couple of times. Watching them, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing a little too close, his hands lingering a bit too long. A few times, I saw him lean in and whisper something that made her laugh, and she glanced at me like they were sharing a secret. It left a bad taste in my mouth. Eventually, he led her back to me, making a show of offering her hand with an exaggerated flourish. I think it's only fitting that the good doctor's last dance goes to her husband, he said with a smirk. I forced a smile, thanked him, and took Samantha's hand. As we danced, I couldn't help but notice the familiar scent of cigar smoke and aftershave clinging to her. I wondered if this was how she picked up his scent back in Wichita. The dance ended, and we made our way out. As I glanced around, I noticed Oswald leaving by himself, which made me wonder, where the hell was his wife? On the drive home, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I noticed George was flying solo tonight, I said. What happened to his wife? She wasn't feeling well enough to come, Samantha answered casually, not looking at me. You two seem to hit it off pretty well, I said, testing the waters. Should I be worried about anything? She gave a small laugh, shaking her head. Of course not. You're the only one I love. I'm glad to hear that, I said, forcing myself to believe her. And you're the only one I love, too, she added quickly. So, what are these big plans George has for you? Oh, there's talk about sending surgeons to different hospitals in the area to perform certain procedures. I guess I'm on the list, she explained. I see, I muttered, feeling uneasy. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Sounded like he had something else in mind, I said. I don't know what that could be, she said, brushing it off. I'd never caught her in a lie before, but something about all of this felt off. I decided to let it go for the moment. I needed more information before jumping to conclusions. Over the next couple of months, things only got worse. Samantha's schedule became even more unpredictable. She was part of a team that required her to travel to clinics and hospitals across the state, and I never knew when she'd be home. We barely saw each other anymore, and when we did, it felt like we were just passing ships in the night. Frustrated, I asked her to adjust her schedule so we could spend more time together, but it was clear her career ambitions came first. She was more focused on climbing the ladder than anything else. Something about it all didn't sit right with me. My instincts as a reporter were screaming that something was off. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but I hesitated for two reasons. First, if Samantha was innocent, she'd be furious if she ever found out I was spying on her, and rightfully so. Second, I didn't want to spend a small fortune just to find out nothing was happening. Luckily, I had friends in the news business, specifically investigative reporters. Samantha didn't know that. So, I reached out to a few of them to see what they could dig up on Dr. Oswald and his so-called traveling medicine show. I was in Seattle reviewing an exhibit when Samantha called to tell me she'd be in Topeka for the weekend for some kind of meeting. That was the last straw. I was done with all of this, but I bit my tongue to keep from losing my temper. I know you were hoping for us to spend some time together when you got back from Seattle, she said, sounding apologetic. I'll make it up to you. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that line. I silently counted to 10 before responding. Dexter, she asked when I didn't say anything. Are you there? I'm here, I replied flatly. Who else is going to this meeting? Well, Dr. Oswald, of course, she said, and I could almost hear her trying to make it sound casual. Of course, I thought to myself. Anyone else? Yeah, some colleagues from my hospital and a few others from across the state. I sighed. Well, you gotta do what you gotta do. I'm not thrilled about it, but I understand. You're the best. I love you, she said. Love you too, I replied, but my heart wasn't in it. As I hung up, I thought to myself, this has to stop. That evening, as I sat down to eat, my phone rang again. It was Ryan Saunder, a reporter buddy of mine who worked for the Kansas City Star. Hey, Dexter, how's it hanging? Ryan's voice boomed through the line. Yup, I said dryly, making him chuckle. That bad, huh? He asked, sarcasm dripping from his voice. Pretty much. Did you find anything? Oh yeah, your Dr. George Oswald is quite the character. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, Ryan started. Let's just say he's richer than God, married to a trophy wife who can't stand him, and knows all the right people. He's also got a reputation as a philanderer, a real ladies' man, especially when it comes to married women, if you catch my drift. Unfortunately, I do, I said, my stomach sinking. And rumor has it, Ryan continued, he's been cozying up to a cute little blonde surgeon from somewhere in the middle of the state. Sound familiar? My heart skipped a beat. You got a name for this blonde surgeon? Nope, but I can tell you she's a real Kansas farm girl. Cute as a button from the photos I've seen. Photos? You've got photos? I asked, feeling my chest tighten. Yeah, they were spotted together at a healthcare event a few weeks ago. Looked pretty chummy if you ask me. Can you send them over? I asked, my voice tight. Sure thing. I'll email them to you right now. Thanks, Ryan. I owe you one. No problem, man. Oh, and by the way, Oswald was caught up in a scandal out west a few years back. You might want to look into it. I don't have all the details, but I know someone who does. I'll send you her info along with the photos. She writes for a gossip blog out in California and knows the whole story. Thanks again, Ryan, I said before hanging up. I remembered Samantha mentioning a meeting in Kansas City a month ago, but she never mentioned being with George. My phone dinged with a new email, and I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for the worst. And there it was, pictures of Samantha with Oswald sitting together at a hotel restaurant. One shot showed them kissing, and another had them walking away hand in hand. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't some professional relationship. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How long had this been going on? Was she in love with him? How could she betray me like this? A million questions flooded my mind, and I could barely think straight. I had one more call to make. I dialed the number Ryan had given me. Melanie Tracy, a woman's voice answered. I introduced myself, explaining that Ryan had referred me to her. Yes, I've been expecting your call, she said. You want to know about George Oswald? Her voice was sharp and direct. Yeah, I replied, my voice low. What can you tell me? Well, about 8 or 9 years ago, he got caught being a little too close with a co-ed in his office. That got him booted out. My heart pounded in my chest. Do you happen to know the name of the co-ed? Sure do, she said, pausing to check her notes. It wasn't publicized, though. The university was insistent that her name not be included in my report. Hold on a sec. I could hear her flipping through pages before she continued. Ah, here it is. Samantha Lawman. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my stomach churn, and the blood drained from my face. Are you absolutely sure? I asked, hoping against hope that she was wrong. Positive, she said, sounding puzzled. Why? Do you know her? That's my wife's maiden name, I muttered, barely able to get the words out. When did this happen? I'm really sorry to hear that, Melanie said softly. I could hear her flipping through her notes again. Let me double check. Okay, it was on this date. She gave me the exact day. My heart sank further as I pulled up my old planner, and there it was, the very day I first met Samantha at that art exhibit. Damn. I thanked Melanie and ended the call, feeling like my whole world had just collapsed. Somehow, I managed to push through the rest of my dinner, though I could barely taste a thing. Afterward, I went back to my room, finished my article, and got it submitted just before the deadline. I packed my bags and checked out early. I needed to go home, to try to figure out what the hell was going on. When I got home early that Friday afternoon, the house felt eerily quiet, more so than usual. I grabbed the mail, brought my bag inside, and went through the usual routine. Dexter's in one pile for Samantha and me to sort through later, junk mail in the trash. Then, I came across a beige envelope addressed to me in beautiful calligraphy from a place called Webster Gallery. I'd never heard of it before, so I opened it. Inside was an invitation to an exclusive art showing at 5 p.m. that evening. I glanced at the address and realized it was local, which was strange. I'd never known of any art galleries in town. Maybe it was new, and they wanted me to check it out for a review. Either way, it would give me a distraction from everything going on with Samantha. So I thought, what the hell? I pulled up to a large 2-story Victorian house right at 5 p.m. Before I could knock, the doors swung open, and I was greeted by a slim, petite blonde who couldn't have been more than 25 years old. Mr. Adrian, right on time, she said with a smile. I appreciate punctuality. Please, come in. I followed her inside, and she shut the door behind us. She turned to face me, offering her hand. My name is Amelia Webster. Welcome to my gallery. A pleasure to meet you, I said, shaking her hand. I didn't realize this little town had an art gallery. She smiled, flipping a strand of hair from her face. Trust me, Mr. Adrian. There's nothing like this gallery anywhere else in the world. Call me Dexter, I offered. Okay, Dexter. You can call me Amelia or just Dr. A, whichever you prefer. Amelia, that's quite an interesting name. She laughed softly. I've been called many things over the years. Feel free to take a look around. I wandered the gallery, inspecting the portraits on the walls. Each one had an eerie, almost lifelike quality, and the subjects all seemed to be frozen in moments of impending doom. It was the most disturbing collection I'd ever seen. The expressions of fear, desperation, and horror on their faces were unsettling, to say the least. As I examined them, I tried to make out the artist's signature, but the strange markings in the corners didn't make any sense to me. One painting, in particular, caught my eye. A woman falling backward, her eyes wide open in terror, hair flying around her face, and her mouth locked in a silent scream. She looked like she was moments away from meeting a terrible end. "This is quite a strange collection," I remarked. "Do you sell many of these?" "These aren't for sale," Amelia said calmly. "They're for posterity." "They're incredibly realistic," I said. "Who painted them?" "Some of them painted themselves," she replied with a sly smile. I looked at her, completely baffled. "How's that even possible?" She didn't answer, just gave me that same smile. "If they aren't for sale, how do you stay open?" "Money isn't an issue," she said, brushing the question aside. "You thought I invited you to write a review, didn't you? Isn't that why you sent me the invitation?" I asked, confused. She shook her head and smiled again. "No, not at all. Actually, I have something special just for you. Come with me." I followed her through a pair of double doors into a smaller room that had an easel covered by a cloth and 2 chairs with a round table between them. She gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs. "Please have a seat," she said, motioning to the chair on the right. I sat down, watching as she moved toward the easel. When she removed the cloth, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. There, on the canvas, was a painting of Samantha, my wife, wearing a black dress, her cleavage on full display. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her nails were painted a deep, seductive red. But what struck me most was her left hand resting on another hand, George Oswald's hand. Samantha was smiling at him with that familiar, sultry look I'd seen many times when we first met. I sank back into my chair, stunned. My mind raced. "I know this must be a terrible shock," she said gently. I nodded, feeling numb. "Yeah," I stammered, not knowing what else to say. "I also know you've suspected your wife of cheating for a while, but you haven't had any real proof," she added, her voice soothing yet unsettling. I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. How did she know all of this? "How do you know all of this?" I asked, my voice tight with suspicion. "It's my job to know," she said, her tone calm and composed. "Who the hell is this woman?" I thought, my mind racing. She gave me a small, knowing smile, as if she could hear my thoughts. "Come back at 10 p.m. tonight," she said, her voice soft but firm. "All your questions will be answered." Feeling numb, I rose from the chair and let her guide me to the front door. "Remember, 10 p.m." she reminded me as she closed the door behind me. I nodded and walked to my car, my mind swirling. When I got home, I tried to distract myself, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I thought about grabbing a beer, but I wanted my mind clear for whatever was going to happen later. So I flipped through the TV channels, trying to focus on anything else, and eventually dozed off for a short nap. I woke up just in time to brush my teeth and head back to the gallery. Once again, the door opened before I could knock, and Amelia motioned for me to follow her inside. "Please come into my office," she said, her voice calm and steady. I got up and followed her upstairs. Her office was lined with shelves full of old books and scrolls that looked ancient. A computer sat on her desk, along with a large monitor attached to the wall. She poured a cup of tea and handed it to me before sitting behind her desk. I took a sip, and strangely, the warmth of the tea seemed to calm me. "Perhaps this will make things clearer for you," she said, moving her mouse. The monitor on the wall flickered to life, and my worst nightmare unfolded before my eyes. I saw Samantha and George together, their closeness undeniable as they were locked in an intense moment. She collapsed next to him. "Oh God, that was incredible," George said, his voice low and satisfied. Samantha laughed, sounding far too happy. "Yeah, it was, sweetie." "The best," she replied. "Think I got you pregnant this time?" George asked with a chuckle. "Maybe. I stopped taking birth control, and I've been making sure Dexter doesn't get too close lately," she said, laughing. George laughed too. "Think he'll believe it's his kid?" "I hope so," Samantha replied casually. "Why do you stay with that loser?" George asked. She shrugged. "Why do you stay with your wife?" George paused. "You think Dexter suspects anything?" "No," she said with confidence. "He believes whatever I tell him." I'd heard enough. My head was spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw Samantha's phone on the nightstand in the video, so I called her. I watched as her phone lit up on the screen. She glanced at it, hesitated for a moment, then declined the call. "Who was that?" George asked, shifting next to her. "Him. He's probably just getting back from Seattle," she said, tossing the phone aside. "Now, come here and do me again." George started to move over her, but I called again, interrupting them. Samantha grabbed her phone, declined the call, and this time threw it back on the nightstand, flipping me off in the process. "What's with the middle finger?" George asked, laughing. "Because he's pissing me off," she said with a scowl. I was ready to explode, But before I could even think of my next move, Amelia handed me a slip of paper. Here's the number to their hotel. They're registered in room 315. I thanked her, though I was boiling inside, and dialed the number. The receptionist's voice was polite as she answered. How can I help you? Room 315, please, I said, my voice tight with anger. The call rang for what felt like an eternity, and then George's voice came through. Hello, he said, sounding casual, as if nothing was wrong. George, I said, my voice colder than I felt. This is Dexter Adrian. You know, Samantha's husband. There was a brief pause before he replied, his tone turning a bit more serious. Listen, Dexter, I think you should leave this between Samantha and me. It's none of your business. Oh, it's very much my business, I snapped back. You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine? You think I don't know what's been going on behind my back? There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could almost hear him weighing his options, trying to figure out his next move. I didn't want to hurt you, man, he finally said, his tone more defensive now. But she wanted it. I'm just giving her what she asked for. The words stung, but I was beyond caring. You're a coward, George. A cheat and a liar. And I'm done with both of you. Put my wife on the phone, I growled through gritted teeth. On the screen, I watched as George looked at the receiver and reluctantly handed it to Samantha. It's for you, he said quietly. Samantha took the phone, clearly annoyed. Hello, she said softly. Well, hello there, Mrs. Oswald, I replied, my voice thick with anger. I saw her face go pale on the screen, and for the first time, she looked truly afraid. Dexter, there's nothing going on. Why are you so upset? She stammered, her voice trembling. And why did you register as Mrs. Oswald? Did you divorce me without saying a word? I snapped. Dexter, nothing happened. She tried to argue. Bullshit, I shouted. The shock on her face was priceless. I'd never spoken to her like that before, and it rattled her. I just watched the two of you. Did you really think you could get pregnant with his child and pass it off as mine? Are you insane? I spat, my voice seething with rage. You saw us? Samantha asked, her eyes darting around as if searching for a camera. Yes, I saw everything, and I heard everything, I said coldly. How long has this been going on? I know you and he were involved back in college. I know you were caught the day we first met. So why, Samantha? Why? Dexter, please, this is the first time anything's happened. You've got it all wrong, she pleaded. Let me come home, and we can talk this through. It doesn't have to affect us. There's nothing left for you to come home to, I said, my voice ice cold. You might as well stay with him. On Monday, I'm seeing a lawyer, and you'll be served with divorce papers. Please, Dexter, I don't want a divorce. I love you, she begged, her voice cracking. I can see how much you love me, I said bitterly. Don't bother coming back. I don't ever want to see your face again. I hung up, feeling a surge of grim satisfaction. I watched the screen as Samantha handed the phone back to George, tears streaming down her face. She scrambled out of bed, frantically pulling on her clothes. I have to go. I have to fix this with Dexter, she said, her voice desperate. Why bother? George asked, getting out of bed lazily. He's divorcing you. Now you're free. No. She shook her head, hurriedly dressing. I have to make this right with him. George sighed. Fine, I'll drive you. You're in no shape to go anywhere by yourself, and God knows what he'll do if you show up on his doorstep. Dexter would never hurt me, she said quietly. Under normal circumstances, no, but you just got caught cheating on him. Who knows what he might do now? George said, concern lacing his voice. I'm driving you home, George insisted. End of discussion. As I watched them get dressed and pack their things, I noticed Samantha had left her wedding rings on the nightstand, like they meant nothing. I turned to Amelia, my mind still reeling. How did you get a camera into their room? I asked, my voice hoarse. She gave me a cryptic smile. Trade secret. Did you mean it when you said you never want to see her again? Amelia asked, her voice calm but curious. I nodded. Yes, I said, my voice steady. She closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering her thoughts. Very well, she said. Why don't you go home and try to get some rest? Maybe I should, I muttered, without warning. She took my head gently in her hands, and a strange warm sensation spread through my body, calming me. Things will get better. Trust me, she said, her voice soothing, and strangely I did trust her. I left her office and drove home, feeling dazed. I must have dozed off because I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on the front door. Groggy, I I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. I wondered if it was Samantha and George, but when I opened the door, I found a Kansas State Trooper standing on my porch. "Mr. Adrian?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm Dexter Adrian," I replied, my heart pounding. "I'm sorry to inform you, sir, but your wife is dead," he said, his voice matter of fact. I froze. "Dead? How? When?" I stammered. "She was in a car with Dr. George Oswald when they encountered a freak tornado on the highway. A trooper who witnessed it said the tornado came out of nowhere, picked up the car, and slammed it down about half a mile away. No one survived. I'm sorry, sir. Her body has been taken to the county morgue." I stood there numb. "Thank you," I mumbled, barely processing the words. After the trooper left, I showered, got dressed, and headed to the morgue to identify Samantha's body. While I was there, I spoke with the trooper who had called it in. "It was the strangest thing I've ever seen," he said, shaking his head. "There wasn't even a cloud in the sky. The tornado just appeared, picked the car up like it was a toy, and then slammed it down. The whole thing was over in seconds. I've never seen anything like it." "Thanks," I said quietly, not knowing how to respond. I made my next stop at the gallery. As before, Amelia opened the door before I could knock. "Please come to the viewing room," she said, her voice soft but firm. We entered the room, and she uncovered the portrait again. Samantha's face stared back at me, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. Outside the window of the portrait, I could see the swirling clouds of a tornado. Amelia gently picked up the painting and carried it to a spot on the wall that seemed reserved for it. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as I watched her hang the portrait. After hanging the portrait, Amelia turned to me. "It really does get easier," she said softly. She placed her hands on my head, and just like before, the weight of my grief seemed to vanish. The desire to mourn was gone. She smiled and kissed my forehead gently. "Now go, live, love, and enjoy life. You'll find someone much better. Trust me." I nodded and left the gallery, feeling oddly at peace. Samantha's funeral was well attended. She had made plenty of friends at the hospital, and most of them were there, along with her parents. They were stunned to learn she had died in such a bizarre accident. I accepted condolences with grace, but strangely, I didn't feel the need to mourn. I even managed to get through the day without mentioning her affair. When the funeral was over, I decided to drive to the gallery again. But when I arrived, I was surprised to find the building empty, with new exhibits being prepared for installation. I asked about the previous paintings that had been displayed in the gallery, but no one seemed to know anything. Then I asked about Amelia, but to my surprise, no one knew her either. They told me they had been out of town recently, and the gallery had just been sitting empty these past few days. There couldn't have been any paintings on display during that time. Over the next few months, I slowly removed all traces of Samantha from the house, giving her things to her family. Surprisingly, we stayed on good terms despite everything. About 6 months later, I was sitting in the front room when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find an attractive brunette standing there, wearing a t-shirt and short shorts. "Mr. Adrian?" she asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied. "I'm Clara Thorndyke, formerly Clara Oswald," she said with a small smile. I invited her in, curious about what brought her to my door. "Please come in. What can I do for you?" I asked. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "For what?" I asked, puzzled. "Well, it was my husband who died in that car with your wife," she said, her tone calm. "I had nothing to do with that tornado," I said, still unsure why she was thanking me. "I know you didn't," she said gently, "but I've wanted to meet you ever since you reviewed my painting at the exhibit in Los Angeles, the one with the country house." Suddenly, it all came flooding back to me. She lifted a box and handed it to me. "I thought you might like to have this." I took the box and invited her to sit. "Would you like something to drink?" "A Coke, maybe." "A Coke would be fine," she replied. I grabbed her a cold one and opened the box. Inside was the very picture I had reviewed years ago, the one that reminded Samantha of Kansas. But now, as I looked closer, I realized something. "This looks a lot like my house," I said slowly. She smiled. "It is your house. I used it as the model." I blinked, surprised. "That's really nice. But why give it to me?" Clara shrugged. "It's strange. Everyone told me I'd never make it as an artist, even George. But then you wrote that glowing review. You were the only person who ever believed in my talent." I framed that review and hung it next to the painting. After George died, I kept hearing this voice in my head telling me to bring it to you. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but the voice wouldn't go away, even in my dreams. So, I finally decided to listen. Well, that's incredibly kind of you. What are you doing these days? I asked, curious about her life. Not much, honestly. I don't really need to work anymore with George's money, but I've been thinking about painting again, she said thoughtfully. I nodded. Do you have a place to work? Not yet, she admitted. Well, there's a building out back with plenty of space. It's got electricity, and I could set it up as a studio if you'd like, I offered. She looked at me, shocked. You do that? Why not? I'm not using it for anything, I said with a grin. Clara wrapped her arms around me, thanking me over and over. I showed her the space, and she loved it. This would be perfect, she said, already imagining it as her studio. I'll pay rent. I shook my head. Don't worry about it. Just keep an eye on the place while I'm gone, and we'll call it even. Clara practically moved into the studio after that, and it felt good knowing someone was around when I wasn't. We grew close over the next few months, and before I knew it, she was spending most of her time in the house, and yes, in my bed. A few months later, we got married. On our wedding night, I thought back to what Amelia had said. You'll find someone much better. Trust me,